Hello, my name is Ariana Valdivinos, and this is my presentation on understanding diversity. A little about myself. Who am I? So I am Ariana, obviously, and my father was born in Mexico City, and my mother was born in La Piedad, Michoacan. My parents came to the United States in their youth. My mom was about 5 years old when she came here, and my dad came in a little bit later in his life at 15. They met eventually their senior year of high school, fell in love, and kind of spent most of their youth and adulthood more in the United States than they did at home in Mexico. So I was born here in Fresno, California, and I'm currently 24 years old. I am a Mexican American, and I do find myself relating more to, I guess, American culture more than Mexican at times, although I grew up celebrating parties the same way and grew up really knowing the language. I kind of stopped speaking Spanish as much after I entered kindergarten and kind of stepped away from a lot of my Mexican culture just due to being surrounded by a diverse group of cultures around me. I do still love my culture and I'm so grateful for my parents teaching me every day about different things that they learned from home and things I want to carry on for my own children. I am a straight female and was baptized at birth into Catholicism, but was then raised Christian. This was because my mom didn't really find herself fully aligning with Catholicism and kind of took us away from the Catholic Church early on, probably about when I turned 5 years old. So not only did I stop speaking Spanish in school, but I was not really involved in environments where Spanish was spoken frequently. So I only really speak Spanish with my grandma, and even then it's pretty rough. But I do want to get back into speaking more and understanding more of my culture. In high school, I felt like I really connected with other Mexican Americans. Although we were all very different, I feel like I learned a lot about other parts of the Mexican culture that I did not experience. Students that were then dreamers and whatnot, like I learned a lot about that stuff and about my culture in different regions by dancing each region in Mexico was pretty awesome and fun, and I learned a lot about being on a stage, which was hard for me at the time. In my early college years, at my community college, I really learned a lot about leadership, and I wanted to utilize that. So I decided to go to my college group, and at that point, I was asked by the leader there to join his leadership team, and I was able to learn a lot about leading and communicating and facilitating large groups. And that experience changed my life in so many ways because it kind of reminded me of being on stage and dance, but this time I was speaking instead of dancing. So I was able to bring those tools on with me wherever I went. So because of this, I feel like I grew and I learned a lot at 18. And it actually really grew my faith as well. I became heavily invested in volunteering and learning about people's testimonies and what brought them to dive into religion the way they have. So that was a beautiful experience, and I still carry that in my heart to this day. My biggest goal right now is to become a kindergarten teacher. What kind of sprouted this goal in me was deciding that I love my job at Starbucks and making coffee, but I kind of wanted to dive a little deeper into what made me what do I want to do for the rest of my life? And luckily, with Starbucks providing ASU, I was able to dive into that. And what kind of sparked this idea was getting a second job, and I worked at a daycare where I led at a Christian-based daycare. I taught kids how to learn Bible verses, sing songs, and I kind of got to see those stages of life that Piaget talks about, and a lot of those child development courses happen, and it was beautiful, and I really appreciated that time to kind of be around children and feel like a child again, but also get to lead them and see them grow. I was mostly in charge of the babies, so I did a lot of diaper changes and a lot of crying, but not me, the babies, but a lot of crying. It taught me a lot about patience and having grace for myself and for children, and wanting to give them that opportunity to learn from me and for me to learn from them as well. It was really awesome. So that's what kind of sparked the idea of becoming a kindergarten teacher for me. And then after that, I worked as a para. This was at a school, a low-income school in my community, and it was really interesting to see like this different part of town that I'd never been to, and see these students who had different disabilities, but really see how gifted they truly are and how intelligent and loved by the SPED teachers, by the other students, and to see how hard a lot of these people worked to be able to provide the resources for these children's needs to be met. So this taught me a lot about diversity within itself. It was a great experience. Today we'll talk about, we will learn and talk about Mexican culture and its intersectionality with autism. And although I did grow up in a Mexican family, I felt like when I went to this low-income school and when I met the students that I met and when I saw these parents, I felt a little bit like there was a disconnect. Like at first I thought, why aren't these parents involved? But then I did see that they were involved, but there was just a huge gap in communication because there was only about one truly Spanish bilingual speaking teacher who was able to communicate well with the parents. Otherwise, she was the only one on campus that was really able to talk to these parents about their students' IEPs and whatnot. So I wanted to dive into why that was and really understand that it was not about neglect or not being loved, but what it had to do with the culture and how it affected these children's experiences and how it affected these parents' experiences as well. So I wanted to dive into both of these topics here. Resource number 1 was this video here found on YouTube. It's called On the Autism Spectrum with Latino Community. So this resource essentially covers everything I just said, and it basically is a study and analysis of specific families in the Latino community who have gone through this and what their experiences were first head on and onward. So a lot of these professionals first talk about what autism is, what it looks like, and what are the signs, and then it talks to the parents and hears them out on why it was hard for them to understand what was going on and the questions that they had, but also the lack of the communication barrier and the healthcare resources that weren't available, and basically covers why there was that disconnect in the first place, and kind of dives into the stigma that exists in the culture about how much guilt a parent has in the Latino community and why they're almost made to feel ashamed and guilty, like as if they did something wrong from other Hispanic families. And I kind of had like an aha moment with this and really saw like, oh, this is why like when the teachers in the SPED classrooms would reach out to the parents, there would be a bit of a pushback and almost a rejection to what was going on with the student in the classroom, and the teacher wanting to have conversations about what happens at home and what happens at school. There was a huge kind of like they didn't want to really fully admit that their child and the student needed specific things to be better. And it has to do with the Latino community and how much pushback there is and stigma there is surrounding their child who might be diagnosed with autism because of this. And this resource really kind of gives grace to the parents and kind of takes away that judgment and kind of says, hey, we understand that you might feel this way, but there really is not a need to feel this way, because at the end of the day, if you want to help your child, we will help you with the resources that exist. So these professionals kind of like talk about how they open the doors to communicating those needs that need to be met. And this resource, it was a website, and it's called Intersectionality Ideas. And this basically talks about the family-centered values that exist, that kind of give you an understanding as to why Latinos think this way, and it has a lot to do with pride at times, and that I can understand and kind of relate and see in my own family at times. And there's also a lot of systemic barriers that exist with Hispanic families, and I got to see a little bit of that going in to a low-income school as a para, and seeing that there was a lot of help that needed, that there was a lot of help that was kind of needed in every classroom. I was even moved from classroom to classroom because of the lack of help, and if this is how it is at a school, a government-funded thing, I can't imagine what it is at home. And there's a huge lack of help at home as well. So there's a lot of things that provide that create these barriers with Hispanic families, and realizing that their child even has autism in the first place. And this could include language, healthcare access. So this website pretty much talks about the diagnosis challenges that exist with that. It also talks about the cultural concerns about the children's futures. There seems to be a lot of pushback because they feel like almost offended. I don't know if that's the right word, but like a little bit protective is probably a better word, of how their child is perceived because of their culture, because of my culture. So there was just a huge pushback. And so a lot of these researchers kind of dove into that and put an emphasis on culturally sensitive practices, and highlight a lot of the diagnostic challenges that exist because of the lack of resources and late diagnosis. So this website basically not only talks about the problems, but also provides an understanding and support systems for these Hispanic families. So that was a big eye-opener in reading about like the lack of healthcare and the lack of communication that kind of exists out there. So I really recommend anyone that's interested to look into this, or anyone at all. It's really just a tool to understand and to use in your own life as well. This third resource here is another website that talked about this situation and this problem that is still going on today. And it kind of provides like a help group, and it is called the help group. Right here it says the type of resource, and then I talked about intersectionality ideas present in the resource. And this resource examines cultural values, socioeconomic barriers, systemic issues, linguistic differences. And it talks about the stigma as well due to the delayed diagnosis. Ultimately, this article provided by the help group and authored by Christina Lopez with a PhD here, it talks about all these things, and also provides the links and resources like the programs that are parent-led support groups for Latino mothers, and it underscores the importance of cultural humility, bilingual resources, and community engagement for providing and improving outcomes for Latino children with autism. So this is kind of on the same basis of these gaps and the bridges that can be formed to solve these problems that are existing. So my biggest takeaway from all of this is that there needs to be an unveiling of judgment. There is a huge stigma that exists in a lot of cultures, not just Latino cultures. And in order to get rid of that stigma and to really face it head on, is to first understand it and realize that it's not because the children are unloved at home. It's not because the parents don't care enough. And it's not even because the parents are embarrassed, but it's because of the stigma that exists because of the culture. and finding the best route to communicate those needs and have the resources that are able to be translated to Spanish speakers, and really have open, honest conversations with the parents and loving approaches. And that is what cultural equity is all about. It's about recognizing the cultural differences and without judgment, and providing and bridging those gaps in order for there to be changes and support for these families and for anyone that has cultural differences. So it's all about acknowledgement for me. I think the biggest thing is because at first I wasn't even thinking like, oh, these Mexican parents are not involved. I was thinking these parents aren't involved. But then I realized, being Mexican American, of course it has to do with culture as well. It's not a personal thing. It's just different values, and maybe it's because the parents weren't educated on these things and never met someone with autism. And so for when they had children, there was a lot of confusion, a lot of fear that existed. And it was all about bridging those gaps and kind of meeting them where they're at. And that's exactly what equity is. And it's about not equality, but equity, which is kind of being able to meet those needs in whatever way they need to be met and make things easily understood to anyone, regardless of where they're coming from and what their plans are. So this has really been helpful for me as someone who wants to go into education and being able to recognize not only autism but cultural differences. So I really hope that you enjoyed listening. Thank you for your time. And here is a list of the 10 resources I have. I have it linked here. Thank you so much.